When you think of the most dangerous gangsters ever, names like Al Capone and John Gotti probably pop into your head. They're the godfathers, the legends we know from movies and old newspaper headlines. But the truth is, the men who are most feared in the underworld are the ones you've never heard of. Their stories were too brutal, their methods too savage for the mainstream. These were the mobsters so unhinged that even the mafia itself wanted them gone. We're talking about the enforcer who collected bounties on other mobsters and the guy who literally kidnapped his own bosses. These are the stories that were too shocking for the history books, where brutality wasn't just a job, it was a way of life. Today, we're counting down the top 5 most dangerous gangsters you never knew about. Number 5, Frank the Enforcer, Mac Lane. Kicking off our list is a man the Illinois Crime Survey once called the most brutal gunman who ever pulled a trigger in Chicago. That man is Frank McAlane, a Prohibition-era Irish gangster who terrorized Chicago's South Side. While Al Capone was building an empire on strategy and PR, McAlane was building his on pure, raw violence. He was a raging alcoholic who, when drunk, would slip into a psychosis, seeing enemies everywhere and answering with a hail of gunfire. McAlane led the Salty's McAlane gang during the city's beer wars, a brutal fight for control of bootlegging. His crew was allied with the rising Chicago outfit under Johnny Torrio and Al Capone, fighting against rival Irish gangs like the Southside O'Donnell brothers. But McAlane wasn't just a soldier in this war. He was its most terrifying weapon. He's credited with introducing the Thompson submachine gun to the Chicago underworld, forever changing how mob hits were done. Before him, it was pistols and shotguns. After him, the streets of Chicago echoed with the sound of the Tommy gun. One of the most chilling stories of his sadism comes from a man named William Shorty Egan, a driver for the rival O'Donnell gang. In 1923, McAlane and an associate kidnapped Egan and another driver. Egan, who somehow survived, later said McAlane sat in the front seat, started laughing for no reason, then turned around and shot the other driver. He reloaded and shot him again, laughing the whole time. And his violence wasn't just for rivals. Once, while drinking heavily at a bar, a friend dared him to prove how good a shot he was. McAlane pulled out his pistol and killed a completely innocent man who was just having a drink at the other end of the bar. He had an uncanny knack for escaping justice. Witnesses were too terrified to testify, and he'd often show up to court drunk, yet somehow walk free. His brutality reached a final breaking point when he got into an argument with his wife, Elfrida Regas, shot her 4 times, and then shot and killed her 2 yapping German shepherds. Even for the mob, this was too much. His remaining associates reportedly put together a retirement fund just to get the dangerously unstable gunman off the streets for good. Number 4, Joe Bananas, Bonanno. At number 4, we have a man whose danger came from his ambition and his cunning, not his psychosis. Joseph Bonanno, head of the Bonanno crime family, was one of the youngest bosses in New York mafia history, taking over when he was only about 26. Unlike the flashy godfathers, Bonanno kept a low profile for over 30 years, quietly building an empire that stretched from New York to Arizona. He looked down on dirty rackets like prostitution, focusing on more sophisticated schemes like bookmaking, loan sharking, and union extortion. Bonanno's influence was massive. He was a longtime member of the Commission, the mafia's board of directors, and helped shape the rules of American organized crime for decades. But behind that quiet exterior was a ruthless strategist who wanted to be the capo di tutti I capi, the boss of all bosses. In the early 1960s, he and another boss, Joseph Magliocco, plotted to assassinate their 2 biggest rivals on the Commission, Carlo Gambino and Tommy Lucchese. It was a move that would have made him the most powerful mob boss in the country. The hit was assigned to a Colombo family capo named Joseph Colombo. But in a shocking betrayal, Colombo went straight to Gambino and Lucchese and told them everything. The commission was furious. They summoned Bonanno and Magliocco to face the music. Magliocco showed up, confessed, and was forced into retirement. Bonanno, however, refused to appear at the exact same time he was subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury. Trapped between the Commission's wrath and a federal indictment, Bonanno did something nobody saw coming. On October 21st, 1964, after dinner with his lawyers, he vanished. For 19 months, the world wondered what happened. Headlines declared him dead. Then, in May 1966, he just strolled into a federal courthouse in Manhattan, claiming he'd been kidnapped by the mob. He said his own cousin, Buffalo boss Stefano Magaddino, had held him captive for weeks. It was a wild story, but one that neither the cops nor the other mobsters ever bought. The general belief in the underworld was that Joe Bonanno had faked his own kidnapping. And honestly, it was a brilliant, if totally audacious, move. By disappearing, he dodged the Commission's justice and a grand jury testimony. He simply took himself off the board, waited for things to cool down, and reappeared with an unbelievable alibi. Joe Bonanno was dangerous because he played a different game, one so strategic it allowed him to do what almost no other boss could: retire. Number 3. Tony Joe Batters. Accardo. Coming in at number 3 is a man who represents the ultimate form of mob danger, being completely untouchable. Tony Accardo, also known as Joe Batters, was the ultimate survivor. He started as a low-level hood and rose to become the undisputed boss of the Chicago outfit for decades after Al Capone. This is a man who allegedly took part in some of the most infamous crimes in mob history, but spent only a single night in jail his entire life. He reportedly earned the nickname Joe Batters from Al Capone himself for his skill with a baseball bat when it came to murdering traitors. His brutal reputation was set early on. It's that reputation that places him at the center of one of the most notorious events in American crime history, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. On February 14, 1929, men dressed as cops walked into a garage and executed 7 members of the rival Bugs Moran gang. While his direct role was never proven, Accardo himself later bragged on federal wiretaps that he was one of the gunmen. Whether he actually pulled the trigger or not, the legend itself became a huge source of his power. After Capone went to prison, Accardo's power grew. He became the day-to-day boss in 1947 and eventually the final authority in 1972, steering the outfit into new, profitable rackets like skimming from Las Vegas casinos. His genius was his ability to insulate himself from the crimes he ordered. While his underlings took the fall for schemes that skimmed millions, the money quietly flowed up to Accardo, and the FBI could never pin it on him. He avoided the flashy lifestyle of bosses like Capone and Gotti, preferring quiet nights at home, but that quiet life hid a chilling capacity for revenge. In 1978, while Accardo was on vacation, some burglars broke into his suburban Chicago home. Shortly after, the 3 suspected thieves and 4 of their associates were found brutally murdered, some strangled with their throats cut. Law enforcement was certain that Accardo, enraged that his home had been violated, had ordered the killings as a message. It was a stark reminder that even in retirement, his power was absolute. Tony Accardo died of natural causes in 1992 at the age of 86. He outlived his enemies, outsmarted the law, and died a free man, making him one of the most dangerously effective mob bosses of all time. Number 2. Crazy Joe Gallo. At number 2 is a man who didn't just break the mob's rules, he shattered them. Joseph Crazy Joe Gallo was a captain in the Colombo crime family, but he acted more like a renegade warlord. Diagnosed with schizophrenia as a young man, his wild unpredictability made him one of the most feared men in New York, not just by his enemies, but by his own family. To the mafia, which is all about order and obedience, Gallo was a walking nightmare. From his crew's headquarters on President Street in Brooklyn, Gallo built a loyal following that was more like a guerrilla army. In the late 1950s, his boss, Joe Prophecy, allegedly used Gallo's crew for the infamous murder of Albert Anastasia, the feared head of the Gambino family. But Gallo and his brothers felt they weren't getting their fair cut from the notoriously greedy Profaci. While most crews would have just grumbled quietly, the Gallos decided to do something about it. In February 1961, they did the unthinkable. They kidnapped 4 high-ranking members of their own family, including the underboss and even Profaci's own brother. Profaci himself, barely escaped being captured. This was basically blasphemy in the world of Cosa Nostra, and it shattered the idea that a boss was untouchable. A tense negotiation followed and the hostages were eventually released, but the betrayal kicked off the First Colombo War. The war that followed was ugly and public, dragging the mob's secret business into the streets. 9 murders and 3 disappearances were blamed on the war. It became a media spectacle, and Crazy Joe, with his charismatic smirk and love for the camera, became a public figure. Even after being sent to prison for extortion, his legend only grew. He read philosophy, befriended black militants, and polished his image as an intellectual outlaw. When he got out, the conflict fired right back up, leading to the shocking public shooting of his own boss, Joe Colombo, at a rally in 1971. While his direct role was never proven, everyone in the underworld believed he was behind it. Joe Gallo's danger was his total defiance. He turned the mob's code of silence into a public performance and waged war not just on his enemies, but on the very idea of mafia hierarchy. Number 1, Vincent Mad Dog Coll. And at number 1, we have the man who was so out of control that the combined forces of the New York underworld put a price on his head. Vincent Mad Dog Coll was a young, baby-faced Irish-American hitman who, in a career that lasted only a few years, left a trail of chaos that terrified both the public and the mob. Coll started as an enforcer for the notorious bootlegger Dutch Schultz. By 19, he was already charged with a double murder, though the charges were dropped. But Coll's ambition was too big to be controlled. He started running his own side hustles, including, most audaciously, kidnapping other powerful gangsters for ransom. He knew they couldn't exactly go to the police. This blatant disrespect led to a violent split with Schultz, igniting a gang war that resulted in the death of Coll's own brother. The event that sealed his infamous legacy happened in July 1931. During a chaotic shootout while trying to kidnap another gangster, a stray bullet from a submachine gun killed a 5-year-old child named Michael Vengali, who was playing on the street. The public was horrified, the press went crazy, and New York's mayor famously dubbed him Mad Dog Coll, a child killer who was now public enemy number 1. Despite being arrested, Coll hired a top lawyer with his ransom money and, in a stunning turn, was acquitted. But his acquittal didn't make him safe. He was now a pariah. His actions brought way too much heat and broke the unwritten rules of the underworld. Dutch Schultz, along with other powerful figures like Oni Madden and even Lucky Luciano, all agreed. Coll had to go. A massive $50,000 bounty, an incredible sum at the time, was placed on his head. The hunt was on. On February 8th, 1932, just 2 months after his acquittal, Coll was making a call in a drugstore phone booth. An associate had set him up, a limo pulled up, and gunmen with a Tommy gun opened fire, pumping 15 bullets into the 23-year-old gangster. Vincent Mad Dog Coll was dangerous, not because he was a killer, but because he was a force of chaos with no allegiance to anyone. A man so violent he became an enemy to everyone, including the very mobsters he once served. Conclusion. From Frank McElwain's cold-blooded rampages to Tony Accardo's untouchable reign, from Joe Bonanno's masterful manipulation to Joe Gallo's open rebellion, and finally to the pure chaos of Vincent Mad Dog Coll. These men operated in a darker corner of the underworld where even the normal rules of organized crime didn't apply. Their stories prove that for every famous gangster whose name we know, there are others lurking in the shadows, whose histories are even more shocking. They show that the most dangerous threats are often the ones you never see coming. What do you think? Which of these gangsters was the most terrifying? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the untold stories of crime history, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching.